Welcome everybody. Today we're gonna analyze the emotional facial expressions of Luigi Mangione in his court appearance. We're gonna do it from a scientific perspective, and we will analyze only the part where his lawyer speaks, because for the other parts of the court appearance we didn't have that much of quality footage because the camera didn't focus on Luigi especially.
As they can give to us, especially now that we have two proceedings that we have to answer to, one of them being death.
So far, no blatant signs of emotions in the face. This doesn't mean that he's not feeling an emotion, but this means that he's just not displaying it. Maybe he's trying to control his facial expressions, or maybe he's trying to control his emotions, or maybe he just doesn't feel that much of an emotion right now. So we're just gonna keep watching the video. Keep in mind that when the emotion is felt strongly, it's very difficult to avoid a leakage in the facial musculature. So it's very difficult to hide the facial expressions when the emotion is very strong. So he's either very good at hiding it, or he's not just feeling a strong emotion, or maybe not an emotion at all so far, but we're gonna see some signs of emotions later in the video. What we just saw was not a sign of an emotion, but rather was a voluntary expression controlled by the motor cortex of the brain that is found in the frontal lobe. So that was voluntary, but we're looking for involuntary, spontaneous facial expressions of emotions, which are controlled by subcortical areas of the brain, more primitive areas of the brain. Here we just saw a contraction of the mentalis muscle that raises the lower lip. This is strongly associated with sadness, even though this again could be a voluntary expression. In the expression that we saw before, the fact that it was voluntary was more blatant. So I'm not quite sure about this one, also because it was a very quick expression, and these kind of expressions in the scientific literature are called micro-expressions, and they often happen when somebody feels an emotion and he tries to hide the emotion. He tries to hide the signs of the emotions. But also, I didn't see other signs of sadness in the face, so we don't need other signs to find sadness, but it would have been reassuring to find at least a contraction of the medial part of the frontalis muscles that raise the inner corner of the eyebrows. That would have been, somewhat conclusive to diagnose a sadness, a state of sadness.
They are literally treating him like...
So here we just saw anger. I'm very confident about this one. Luigi was feeling angry. He was trying to hide it maybe, but the real emotion leaked through a micro expression. You can see how his lips tighten up in a very angry fashion. This is a movement that is strongly associated with anger. We have a contraction of the orbicularis oris muscle that creates that typical anger expression.
Like he is like some sort of political fodder, like some sort of spectacle. He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. It was absolutely unnecessary. He's been cooperating.
Now Luigi displayed what looks like a sign of surprise. You can see his eyebrows raise. There's a contraction of the frontalis muscle, both the lateral parts and the medial part. It seems like it was a reaction to what his lawyer just said. And yeah, that was probably the stimulus that triggered the emotion right there. To be fair, the movement is pretty asymmetrical, and this happens more often when the expression is not genuine, and therefore when it's, a voluntary facial expression, when it's controlled by the pyramidal tracts rather than the extrapyramidal tracts. Also, the fact that he's gonna move his eyebrows voluntarily throughout the rest of this footage gave me some small doubts that this maybe could be a voluntary expression. But if I have to go with my knowledge and my gut feeling, I would say this is a genuine expression of an emotion, and I think he's trying to control his facial expressions, but when they're, too overwhelming, they just leak out through what could be a partial expression like this. You see, he was blinking, otherwise maybe we would have seen some action on the upper eyelid. Another thing that I see that is very typical of surprise is the shifting of his attention. He was looking down. As soon as she said what she said, he then shifted his focus, his attention to the source of the possible stimulus.
with law enforcement. He had been in custody for over a week.
Now what we just saw looks like a subtle expression of sadness. It's a very subtle movement. It's a contraction of the medial portion of the frontalis muscle, strongly associated with sadness. Now, did he do it on purpose? I don't think so. The movement is too short. I think he's trying to control his facial expressions, and that was the leakage, the small leakage that came out of the neural tug of war between the brain cortex and the subcortical areas that control the voluntary facial expressions and the involuntary ones through the pyramidal tract and the extrapyramidal tract. Now, I do see a little bit of action in the outer part of the eyebrow, but the movement is weaker compared to the one on the inner brows, and also it's only on one side. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and let's go further.
Waived extradition. He was cooperative at all accounts. There was no reason for the NYPD and everybody to have these big assault rifles that, frankly, I had no idea was in their arsenal.
These, on the other hand, doesn't look like a facial expression of emotion at all. It doesn't look spontaneous. He raised his eyebrows at the very moment when he was looking up. So let's go further.
And to have all of the press there, the media there, it was like perfectly choreographed.
Here again, doesn't look like a facial expression of emotion. It looks connected to the shift in his gaze.
And what was the New York City mayor doing at this press conference, Your Honor? That just made it utterly political. And as Your Honor knows, under Lauro v. Charles, the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit has held it to be clearly established that these staged perp walks to the media, unrelated to a legitimate law enforcement objective, is unconstitutional. And I submit there was zero law enforcement objective to do that sort of perp walk. There's absolutely no need for that whatsoever.
Now, while she was saying that he was the victim of an injustice, of an unconstitutional act, he showed three different signs of sadness. We already saw these movements before, but we weren't quite sure whether they were spontaneous and emotional. But here we got some pretty good signs. The fact that we saw in a span of a few seconds, we saw three different facial expressions associated with the same emotion, and the fact that he was exposed to a stimulus that often triggers sadness, the being victim of an injustice, makes me pretty confident that we are in front of signs of real sadness. He's probably trying to hide it. He's probably trying not to show the emotion, but the emotion got leaked anyways. Also, look how the second eyebrow expression is quick. Look how quick it was and how short of a range of motion it was. That is a sign that is a spontaneous expression. He probably tried to stop the spontaneous movement to occur. He probably used his frontal cortex to try to stop his face from moving, because the input came from subcortical areas. If it was only for the movement in the lower lip, I would have said that this was only a voluntary expression that he made to signal an agreement. You can see that he nods his head right after, but probably he just nodded his head to try to play it off, because the other signs that we saw were very particular and very specific of sadness.
And frankly, Your Honor, the mayor should know more than anyone about the presumption of innocence that he too is afforded when dealing with his own issues. And frankly, I submit that he was just trying to detract from those issues by making a spectacle of Mr. Mangione. And there are consequences to this. He has a right to a fair trial, and I just want to put on the record statements that the mayor made publicly about my client. Nothing saying.
So in the last few seconds, we ignored a lot of eyebrow movements because they were connected to him changing and shifting his gaze, looking up and down and whatever. But this one is more particular. He's raising his eyebrows as she speaks. So maybe he's surprised, or maybe he just decided to raise them. I don't really have an answer for that. What do you guys think? Was he surprised about what she said, or do you think it was just a voluntary expression? So guys, the first part of the video is over. If you want to see the rest of it, of the facial expression analysis of this footage, please write it in the comments, and please subscribe. I would appreciate it a lot. And sorry for my accent, guys. See ya.